Where are we going? Welcome to this exclusive podcast produced by Spirit Watch Ministries that will show where life in our darkening times is now turning and how you can avoid the detours of deception through the hope of biblical truth. The Lord Jesus in Matthew 24 warned us over 2 millennia ago and how urgently we need to heed him now. Our host is Pastor Rafael Martinez, a seasoned Northwest Indiana-based minister, intercessor, and counter-cult apologist who will help you discern the journey of change we're all on as the last day of the last days now winds down. For more information, check out our Facebook page and our website at spiritwatch.org. Now, here's Pastor Rafael.
Hello, thanks once more for stopping by, for downloading our program podcast entitled, Where Are We Going? I'm Rafael Martinez, a minister in the Church of God Cleveland movement, and thanks for taking the time to listen in today. This podcast is one of the services of Spirit Watch Ministries, an outreach of discernment in our deceptive world that has been ongoing since 1993. You can learn more about us at our website, spiritwatch.org, and keep up to date using our Facebook and YouTube links there on the page as well. Our Spirit Watch Unchained blog has been around a few years, and we post there with updates when we can, as well as offer exclusive discernment content you won't find anywhere else. We hope you'll enjoy visiting there as well. And while you're at it, invite all of your friends, your enemies, your next-door neighbors, your tax collectors, and everyone all points in between to also listen in. We're always seeking new audiences, and we would appreciate your help in helping build ours. We're now found on Spotify, Google, and Amazon podcast channels, and if you're here visiting, thanks so much. Pour yourself a nice cup of ice water, relax for the next hour or so. Or maybe my wife's Cafe Bustelo might be your cup of tea. Well, you could serve anything in our Spirit Watch virtual studio, and we even have Diet Coke that tastes good. We are really today so glad to finally, after some of our efforts to line our schedules up, to feature a very special visitor in our podcast today. Naomi Wright is the founder and director of Be Emboldened Ministries, a Christian organization based in Denver, Colorado, which is devoted to helping those impacted by cults with their very refreshingly unique approach of public education, personal involvement, post-cult survivor assistance, counseling, and mentoring from that spiritual perspective. We discovered them working among the survivors of cultic movements we've been monitoring, and we're just delighted to have made their acquaintance. Meeting another ministry director is always a deep pleasure and honor, and our podcast today will feature our discussion, which we think will help a lot of people. It was deeply refreshing and encouraging to me, and I'm glad to have met Naomi and Be Emboldened and look forward to staying connected with them. Now, if you're struggling with recovery from cultism, you have a loved one involved in the cult, or you just have some general questions about the whole religiously abusive phenom of cultism, listen on. Naomi, it's a pleasure to have you on our podcast today. Thanks for putting your incredibly busy and productive life schedule together with my own. I'm so glad to finally get a chance to meet you and share with you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me here. And I like the word full because I feel like busy can be an excuse. Like we make time, right? The best that we can. So yes, it's full. It's getting more full, but I swear if I wasn't relocating cross country, we would have met a month ago. So thank you so much for your patience.
That's all right. I know, like I said, as ministry directors, we understand that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that 90% of people never see. And I appreciate the fact that you're able to carve a little time out with us today. So Be Emboldened Ministries, how long have you been involved with it, and what drew you personally to that kind of work? It is a counseling ministry. It's also a countercult ministry. To me, countercult ministry is the opposition to cultism and false doctrine and false practice that destroys lives, and there's an intentionality in bringing out truth that helps people with that, and I believe that's what you do. But you also go on and move forward with counseling, and you try to be proactive as well. Maybe explain what does Be Emboldened exactly do?
Sure. So the reason you're probably like, it does this or maybe that is because the goal for Be Emboldened is that over time it'll become the hub that people know they can go to, like that trusted, at least first step that they can go to for solid, reputable information in regards to a religious abuse or religious trauma experience. So whether that is something deeply unfortunate that has happened within a mainstream church, or someone has been harmed, scripture has been used in a way it should not have to somehow, meet an agenda. We certainly see things like that happen. As grievous as that is, it does happen. We want to recognize it, come alongside people who've had that experience, as well as people who have come out of cults, whether it was a more underground situation or whether they were just walking around town and everybody knew them but didn't know their full story, which is most similar to my story. So Be Emboldened looks at both the prevention side of things, because if we can educate and we can equip, then we can hopefully see less people become involved as they get older, as well as, unfortunately, we're always going to have people who are victimized because the leaders of groups such as this are really darn good at what they do.
Yeah.
And also sometimes people are born into it, which again is kind of a nod back to my story. So we're always going to need that side of things too. So Be Emboldened is focused on that big picture of, again, being that hub. Internationally, we serve people all over the world already. Currently, we're doing that, which is such a gift.
Great.
And we look at resources, resource creation, and one-on-one group support and in-person support as well. We offer something called intensives, where we can come in person and provide a significant support over a 4 to 5 day span.
Right.
So that's where we're at currently. For my personal story, again, I mentioned a couple of things to segue us into that, but I was raised in I call it a pseudo-Christian cult to give people some context, because I was raised told that I was Christian. Right. I didn't have another word for it. There was no other name for this group that I had been taught. I was just told I was Christian. So being raised in public schools still, which isn't always the case, we have many in our group who are homeschooled. That was very confusing for kiddos I went to school with. You're Christian, but you don't celebrate any holidays. You dress very different. There's a lot of things that are different about you that we can tell just by having you in our classroom.
Right.
There was so much they didn't know at the same time. For example, our group did practice polygamy. And so my dad had a number of wives throughout the year, but 4 with whom he did have children. And so I'm one of 16 from 4 different wives in total. And he wasn't the only male who practiced this within the group. So again, all of this going on under the radar while I'm attending public school in a state, all within the United States in general, polygamy is illegal. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think there's an exception.
No.
Let me know if I'm wrong, but yeah, I think it's federally.
It's a federal law. I mean, that's why it became a big issue for the Mormon Church
Right.
back in the 1800s, when they almost did not get statehood because of it.
Right. Yes, I said that with such confidence, and then I had this wait, do I have that correct for sure? I'm like, yeah, that's why everybody hides.
I think you're on the money with that. Yeah, that's definitely illegal.
Yeah, so I came out of that over in kind of in layers, which I think is how a lot of us come out of something. I talk about how we don't go from A to Z, we creep towards Z and then it's a little hop to Z. When we step back out of a harmful group experience, we don't go from Z back to A either. We have to kind of work our way out in layers in our healing. And so ultimately, COVID hit. I was COO of an internationally recognized company and thought, this is going to be my career. In January, I thought that I'd helped build this company from the ground up. And then 2 months later, it got shut down because it was in the event industry. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I guess it's not going to be my career, Lord. And I felt him really pulling me in a different direction. And the first thing I heard from him was, tell them what I've done for you. And I was like, all right, I can do that. That is the least I can do for you, God, for all you have done for me, is I can share my testimony of what you've done for me, and Be Emboldened has been birthed out of that.
Great. COVID has been a horrible scourge, and yet God has used it to sometimes direct us and change things in ways that we never thought were possible, aren't they?
Yes.
I mean, he takes the what sometimes is the worst and turns it into opportunities to become our best. So I'm glad to hear you say it, because COVID destroyed my job. I was working for the Whirlpool Company for 29 years, and then
like about 2 years ago, they decided the bean counters there decided that I was a low-hanging fruit that could be knocked down. And so for 2 years, I've really been thrashing through and trying to keep things moving here. So, but like you said, through it all, God has His ways of making sure things change, and that change is always good as long as it's tempered by some sort of mediation, some sort of a decent rudder, and I think that's what our ministries both try to do. I think we try to provide objective perspectives for people to get alternative ways to look at the experiences of life that they've been in when it's regarding cultism in all its forms, not just religious, but psychological and political and et cetera, et cetera. So you hold a Master of Science degree in social work. Wow, that's incredible. So how long ago did you get that?
I got my MSW in 2011. So I got that in 2011. So that one's been a while. And then my master's at Denver Seminary, I have 2 classes left. I will do one this fall, one in the spring, and I'll finally be done. I started there way back in 2015. So this one's taken me a long time.
I understand. Yeah, those masters do take a while, don't they? I get that. So how long have you been, do you have any sort of formal practice other than Be Emboldened? Or do you regularly work with people as a therapist?
I do have some therapy clients within the state of Colorado. That's where I'm licensed. And so the way the laws work there and in most states, the clients need to be in the state. I don't have to be in the state, but the clients that I see for therapy have to be in the state. So I do have some therapy clients in the state of Colorado. Otherwise, I do what we call mentoring, which is not as clinical. And that's what we offer through Be Emboldened, again, so that we can meet people all over the world. I've seen people in Italy, South Africa, New Zealand, Norway, Canada. So really spread out. And it's just, it's incredible. Again, there's the privilege, the honor to be able to meet people in other countries and be able to support them and learn more about what's going on for them where they're located. It's also incredibly eye-opening to the magnitude of this problem.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm not a therapist, but I've been in ministry, since 1983. I was called to ministry back then, and I was also called to work with people in cults back then. It's a long story I get into. There's other places on our Spirit Watch site where I testify that I give like a historical thing there. So the parts of my story involve, basically I was called, I'm a pastor, I'm a minister, and I provide pastoral care and counseling to victims and members. And there's a lot of affinity that therapists have with pastors in many ways, I believe. And, now I've never represented myself as a therapist, a professional therapist. I've never have. I don't provide professional level, type of counsel. However, I think there's a lot of those affinities, bleed over. And I think it's an incredible amount of cooperation that can go on. We both provide care to the mind as well as to the soul. Therapists help people gain balance in their lives emotionally and psychologically, and pastors should do the same, but also provide spiritual level context. And again, in the model of caring Christian community. Therapists, and pastors, I think I said, I think are very, very closely linked. And so it's similar, and I'm glad we both have a part in it. And, you're doing exactly what I would love to be doing right now, is just strictly, reaching out and helping people as a pastor or as a counselor exclusively. But this side of work I'm doing has been more, I've done a lot more research and expose and confrontation with these groups. And I really, and that's where I've been. And, but at the same time, at this point in my life, I'm starting to broaden out more towards, providing that level of intentional community. We've had support group meetings in the past in our ministry, and we did those in Tennessee for quite a while. We did one up here in the northern part of Indiana once. We're interested in doing them again. which is why we have an online poll going right now on our Facebook page, asking if people would like to do a Google Meet on that. So
Nice.
it's cool that the internet really does and ministry really does enjoy that. It's able to branch out and reach out to everyone. It's so cool. I'm so glad to hear that you are involved with something like that. So, and that's really where, like you said, the need really is just unbelievably vast. It really is. And, So let me ask you a quick question. We've mentioned religious abuse. We've mentioned spiritual trauma. What does that look like in a church where it's ongoing? Well, what can you say to that?
Ooh, so in a church, that can look like a few different things. There's some room there, but as far as what it actually boils down to and is a person's specific experience, because there's a variety of different kinds of abuse out there. And I would say that when we talk about religious abuse, it's more of an umbrella term for oftentimes it's a different kind of abuse that's couched in a religious context. So for example, if someone is sexually abused by someone in leadership in their church growing up, there's a religious component to that as well, because the person's assumed to be a spiritual leader. I mean, in a place of spiritual maturity with knowledge of God's word and who God is, and inevitably whether scripture is used for that abuse or not, their position as a spiritual authority plays into the abuse itself, how the person's going to understand what happened to them and the suffering they're going to have moving on into the rest of their lives. And so religious abuse can come into play with an additional form of abuse. I would say that they can come together. So someone in that specific scenario would have experienced likely both. And when we just separate one out, we miss a very important side of the faith life of an individual. And that's going to be significant in how they even process what happened to them and how they move forward. And what we see so often, which I'm sure is a motivator for you too, is that people ultimately then they don't know who was God and who was the man, and that gets very confusing and muddy.
Right.
And we'll see people just leave it all. Be like, I'm just walking away from all of it. I don't want anything to do with it. I don't know what to do with it. Forget it. And in that, they turn their back on Jesus, who's the one who can really actually help them heal. And so that's heartbreaking. It's devastating. And that's the, core of everything I do, is that in hopes of people recognizing the true Jesus so they can choose him or not, prayerfully, of course, choose him, but not be reactive to something that has happened to them, as understandable as it is that they would be. So that would be my first part about religious abuse, is I can see it as kind of an umbrella term that pairs with another form of abuse. Religious abuse as well, though, can look like someone using the Bible very directly to manipulate people for some agenda that they want to further. And we see that happen. Again, you could link it to financial abuse. That's very common. But in and of itself, someone can just be taking scripture out of context. Because of this, you have to behave this way. Because of this, you have to do that. And it's not actually in alignment with scripture. And the leader's getting something out of it. The leader has something to gain. It's usually, I'm going to quote J. Warner Wallace here, when he talks about why people commit a homicide. For anyone who's unfamiliar with him, that might be like, why is she talking about a homicide detective? Because he was atheist, turned Christianity by investigating Christianity as if it, Jesus was murdered, which is true. So he looked at it through that lens and converted to Christianity. And now he's got books and speaks, and he's a wonderful man. But he says that there's three motivators. It's going to be power, it's going to be sex, or it's going to be money. And we're usually seeing that with our cult leaders or our abusive leaders in the mainstream church as well, who are undercover for a period of time.
That's a great insight.
Call them out.
Yeah, that's great insight. Yeah.
So it's one of those three things. So again, there's something for them to gain. And I think that's important because people in the church, they do just make mistakes. The Bible's got a lot in there, and it's important for us to study it. And we're in different places in our spiritual journeys, our spiritual maturities, our knowledge of God's word. And so if you've got a pastor out there teaching something and maybe he's just doing it wrong, that can absolutely be harmful. if we go to that pastor and we say, hey, this seems off, this is what we're seeing. This is what, the church at large is believing. This is the evidence we have for that. That pastor's like, oh my gosh, I'm horrified. I need to go issue a correction and provide care to the congregation for the mistake that I've made because it's likely impacted their thinking and their relationships. That is a different situation than someone who's like, I would not care because what you're telling me isn't going to help me get my power, my sex, or my money.
Right.
So there are different things going on here where we got to take a step back and critically look at it.
Right. And that's so true because one of the many to-dos I have and have never done, in my writing side of things, is that, I wish I could win the Powerball. I would spend hours every day just writing. There's so much to write about. But one of the things I want to, like I said, I want to certainly chime in on that is that very point that there is so much out there going on in churches that is abusive, but yet there are also other moments in which things aren't abusive, in which churches are exercising legitimate forms of discipline and admonition of people who may need that. But that's again sharply opposed to the sort of punitive and damaging discipline that's applied by cultic movements. But it's important to, like you said, really understand that there's a fine line between the two. And then, like you said, there's a lot of ministers out there. And being one, I know, having been in ministry since 1983, there's a lot of ministers out there that really don't really get and don't understand, and for some reason don't have the wherewithal within them to grasp that what they do and what they say really can be quite abusive and quite incredibly damaging to people. And yes, there are some that readily would, if they finally slowed down enough to listen, would admit, hey, I am doing something wrong and I need to change that. I hear stories in which that happens. I mean, the Worldwide Church of God, that whole wonderful scenario back in the 1990s when they were at one time just a blatantly destructive and abusive cult run by Herbert Armstrong. And now it's completely changed. The leadership from the top down began to really embrace a journey of change. And they lost most of the members who couldn't handle it, and now there's splinters of the Armstrong cult everywhere, going by the name Church of God. I'm a Church of God Cleveland minister, so I'm not one of those. but at the same time, there's definitely a space and time in which God gives everybody a chance to really rethink what they're doing. That's what repentance is about. And like you said, there are some instances also in which there are cult leaders who just flat out won't do that because they like their sex, right. They like their money, they like the power, they like the trip. And it's those are the ones that really count, that really start piling up the religious abuse that we've spoken of. So,
absolutely.
So tell me, as a person out large in public, why should we concern ourselves with these kinds of abuses in our country? I mean, it's a big world, big country. The pundits say one man's cult is another's religion. Right here in Indiana, we have a storied poet by the name of George Ives who would say, well, one man's spinach is another man's poison ivy. So aren't we being intolerable by focusing on these First Amendment protected groups, no matter what they believe? Why should we care?
That's a fun question. So
take a swing at it.
So here's what I see as the difference. I am a firm believer that we do get to choose what we're gonna do. If the Lord could appear before us and we could say no.
Right.
I don't know why anyone would, but that could happen. So free will choice, and I'm not trying to open up a theological can of worms with saying that because I know there could be conversations about predestination or not and things like that. So I don't want to go there. But in general, we get to say yes or no to the church we're going to be a part of, whether we're like, well, we want to go and explore Christianity or we want to go and explore Buddhism. People make these choices in their lives as they get older. They want to stick with the faith of their youth. They want to check out something different. So we see this movement happening, especially I would say here in the United States. I could speak to that for certain. When we're talking about an abusive leader, we're bringing in coercion, manipulation, gaslighting, undue influence, mind control tactics.
Criminal activity.
Yes, criminal activity. And so we start to actually lose that genuine sense of free will choice.
Right.
We're not operating just in clarity of our own mind to make a decision. And that's not what you just quoted from our culture of, well, you know, people should just get to choose. If you don't like it and it looks harmful to you, maybe it's not harmful to them. If they haven't really chosen it and they're being manipulated, they're being gaslit, they're being, unduly influenced, they didn't actually make the choice. And so we do have a problem because that is their right to be able to do it. And that was taken from them.
Right. Exactly. And it spills over. If you get a bunch of people who have been manipulated into making these horrific lifestyle choices that separate them from families, that tear them apart from their own consciences, that riddle them with guilt, that expose them to sexual violence and mental domination and cultic mind control, you get a bunch of people involved with that. What's that going to do to their families? What's that going to do to their children? What's that going to do to the larger world that they live in all around them? I mean, it destabilizes. It destabilizes our society. It brings people down and it's the ultimate antithesis to what Jesus said about living an abundant life. This is not, cultism is not the abundant life Christ assured that we could have. And really that's part of our concern as well. I mean, you can certainly say what you can certainly, I can certainly agree 110% with what you just said regarding the freedom of choice. I mean, like Steve Hassan said, the gentleman who helped write the brilliant book on cult mind control. He said something very clearly. Look, you can believe the moon is made of blue cheese. Okay. That's your freedom to believe that. But if you are tricked and manipulated and somehow fooled into believing, that the moon was made of the moon is made of green cheese because of some manipulation, some unethical form of intrusion into your life, then there's a problem. And that's exactly what we're hitting on. That's at the core of what religious abuse really does. It incorporates that kind of coercive control, which I've consistently called cultic mind control. And we've followed, Robert J. Lifton's, 8 criteria of mind control throughout our podcasts for the past year. We've helped people connect their experiences to what they've seen. And really it just goes to show that when you break down Lifton's 8 principles of mind control, I mean, how you see it in life, you find out that religious abuse powered by this is far more prevalent in places we'd rather not look too closely. And would you agree with that?
Oh, yes. Yes. And if I may jump in, because before we segue, I want to add that I think there's another piece that can oftentimes not be considered by those who are outside, of these group experiences, those who are unfortunately have not had them.
Right.
If someone had come to me at 18 years old, I would have the right to leave if I wanted to. If someone had come to me and said, do you want to get out of this situation? Like, I'm going to help you get out. You can get out. I would have said no. Because, and here's how it could have been misinterpreted. Someone with the view that you had shared of, well, you get to pick, and they would have thought, well, she's happy. She wants to be a part of it. The reason I would have said no would have been because I knew that I would have lost my family.
Right.
It's not because I actually wanted to be there. It's because of the knowledge, not even, it's a true fear because it would have been reality. And I have lost my family at this point. So you're going to lose your family. You might never see your mom again, whom you love like crazy. You might never see your siblings again. And you're going to lose your worldview. You don't actually know what is real. So you're going to step out into nothing. Yeah. You're going to leave with nothing because no one's giving you anything to go with.
Right.
And so people have to understand the question they're asking isn't a yes or no question. It's not that simple. It comes with a lot of consequences. And someone's answer is going to be based on those consequences, not based on that black or white answer of their desire to be a part of it or not. If I would have been told, I'll help get you out and you can still visit your family, you're still going to be treated well, we're going to support you and get you on your feet, it's all going to be great, I would have said, happy to, please help me.
Right.
And so people have to understand the depth and breadth of the question they're actually asking someone when they consider this.
Right. I mean, there's those who are on the outside who have their own, like I said, casual kind of observation about that very thing, based upon a very, very dominant view in America that everything's fine, you should tolerate everything, and it's just it's the culture, it's the times of what's the word I'm looking for? Tolerance and tolerance and inclusiveness. And inclusiveness is a great ideal, but it's also a double-edged sword. And it's something that really at this point really shows how much you can cut everybody. And when you make that kind of statement. So tell me a little bit more then about what your work is. Tell us who are your clientele. In other words, kind of describe for us a typical situation you're called on to help with. For me, it's a concerned parent. There's a sibling. There's a pastor concerned about the sudden change in an idealistic, energetic young person's lifestyle, or somebody who's broken by cultism and emails us or calls us. I mean, we get that a lot. Our inbox, our phone calls just keep coming. All our work with Gladstone and Xenos and Remnant in the past few years, it's just been an ongoing, incredible flow of need that we try to help to. And I really hope and pray, that what we're able to do is help. But for you, and I'm sure again it's similar. It's a similar background. What's a typical situation like for you? I mean, what are your perspectives on that? How has it been going for you?
Sure. So because we look at the kind of the spectrum is the word I use, from mainstream to underground. We have a mix, and I don't hold any as being necessarily worse than the other. I think there's differences, and the differences are going to help us into how to come alongside, but they're all bad. None of them are in alignment with what we're taught in Scripture. They're all a problem. So they all lead someone to a potential place of walking away from the faith as well, which is, again, always heartbreaking and something we hope not to happen. But when we get a call, it can be, I would say most often it's someone who has experienced the abuse personally. That's just mostly what we've had. That's not necessarily what the call needs to be. It's not the requirement. It's not, the be all end all of who we serve. But I would say that is most commonly what we've seen over the past year, because we're still kind of a baby organization. We got our 501c3 status in May of 2021. So we're just heading towards a year and a half now. So we're still newer. The word's still getting out about that we exist. But I would say that's probably the most common, is someone who themselves have experienced something and they're trying to make sense of it and figure out what was that and what do I do with it. And no one understands my context, and I need someone to understand my context. And that's a really tough part out there with finding good support professionals, is we've got wonderful support professionals here in the United States. Very few who have this as a solid area of background so that they can serve well within this context. And so people are struggling to find good help for them specifically. So we will have people coming saying, we're hopeful. Maybe we've seen someone else, we've talked to other people, or I haven't felt safe to come out with my story at all. And I heard your story. I've heard other stories that you've shared. So we want to see if you can help. So that would be number one. We also have people coming forward who, like you said, they know someone. And so they're like, how do I support this person? And so we love to come alongside too and help them navigate conversations, interactions, best practices and how to go about that, but never in a cookie cutter way, right? Because every person's different. We're all designed uniquely. And so we want to know as much about the loved one as we can so that our responses hopefully hit the target. We want it to actually help. That's the point. So that would be second probably most common. Where we're trying to get more into is, again, on the prevention side, doing more teaching and equipping, not only so people don't get involved in a cult or an aberrant, religious group of some kind from the onset, but also so people don't fall into re-victimization, because that is definitely a concern as well. When we come out of these groups and we're trying to get our feet under us, it's a really vulnerable time to then wind up in something else. And so we're really wanting to help people feel strengthened and feel confident in how to identify what's healthy and what's not before they step forward into something else that maybe is not.
Right. And that is very important, because helping people understand the situation from their specific context is so important. You can't, you share with a victim, someone escaping, someone leaving, somebody in transition from a group, somebody struggling to get out. There's different ways you dialogue with them. You cannot say one thing to one person and expect them to understand that person in a different context might. And that's especially true when you're speaking of, like you said, the divide between knowing, who are the victims and who are the victims' support systems, who are their family, who are complete strangers who know a friend, who know someone who's concerned about them. Those are important points to keep in mind, and I appreciate the fact that you make that distinction, because so many people just don't really get it, really how complex this problem can really be when you start talking about relationships and then how they all interact with each other. They really are very important points. Of the clients you work with, how many come from, say, the larger insular groups as opposed to the smaller ones? I think that's been a really big issue that over the past years of my ministry, and like I said, I've been doing this since '83, but I've come to really understand that the perspective of the problem is often what skews it even further. And cultism being what it is, religious abuse being the common denominator pain of mankind, when it's inflicted by spiritual believers who are errant, it's something that's just not recognized very, very easily at all. So, and that's because of the way it's applied and from the different forms of cultism out there. So let's discuss the state of the cult problem from that perspective. I mean, do you see a lot of people coming out from, say, groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons, the so-called traditional cultic movements, or do you see them more from the smaller, more lesser ones? I mean, to me, that's been the big flag right there. It's, but maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, I don't think this answer is going to surprise you from what you just said, but this might shock some of your listeners. I mean, 90 to 95% are the smaller.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge. It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
And many people, they don't have a name for it, just like I didn't. It's, I thought I was Christian. Maybe they used this term or there was this nickname or something. But some of these situations, it's hard to even find information on the internet about them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There isn't even much out there. And so, and it's just, it's crazy. I hear about, it seems like it comes in waves from like a single state. And so they're like, oh my goodness, that state is really saturated with this kind of activity. I had no idea that it was that bad in that state. And then I thought, oh my goodness, no, this state has so much. And now I myself am living in a new state, and all of a sudden I'm finding out about it every time I tell someone what I do. I'm hearing about a new group around that's concerning. And so this is just everywhere. And when we look at these main names where some would say some are world religions, some would say some are cults, but either way, they're not in alignment with mainstream Orthodox Christianity. And maybe I shouldn't say mainstream Christianity, because that's heading maybe in a progressive direction, but Orthodox Christianity, they're not in alignment with our Orthodox Christianity. And so it's just, people will think of these big ones, like you said, and they're not paying a lot of attention to the rest. And I think part of it is because there isn't a lot of literature, and so they don't really know what to do with it.
Right.
And I think that's where people like you and I come in, and other victims, who are these have these incredible survivor stories and testimonies of what's been done in their lives. It's to help educate as to what is really going on under the radar.
And right. And that's, again, is probably the one thing that really, and people can tell when cultism is bad, but that's the one thing that I think a lot of people are so put off by, is the fact that they can't really recognize the problem except when it comes and bites them in the leg, when it's their kid who gets involved with some Bible study that tells them to suck their savings dry and go chase off on the road with them somewhere. I mean, and one of the tragic things that I, as a minister, have had to really face up to and finally just come to terms within myself and how I view the problem, is the fact that so much of this is rooted in what we would think are Orthodox Christian churches. I mean, I live in Hammond, Indiana. Hammond, Indiana is the hometown for the First Baptist Church of Hammond. It used to be formerly run by Jack Hiles. It is one of the fundamental bastions in America for Baptist fundamentalism. I mean, they're squeaky clean, they're incredible people, they're very active everywhere, and yet this group, this gigantic, one of the first so-called mega churches in America, was run by a man who I think really can be called a cultic leader, and his successor was no better. So I've never had a chance to really go over and really speak and get involved with people there, but they're not alone by any means. I mean, the traditional groups like Mormonism and the Latter-day Saints, and I mean the Jehovah's Witnesses are very active around here. And there's also a very, very well dug in congregation of a church called La Luz del Mundo, which is a cult imported from Mexico among the Mexican immigrants all over the United States. This cult preys upon them, and their leader was just recently jailed for having been involved in the most grotesque of sexual and religiously abusive escapades that he finally got called out on. But there's a very thriving congregation right around the corner from us here. So it's a big problem. And when you drive by these nice, well-kept church buildings and see these nice, well-dressed people flooding out and going to buy tamales on Sunday and going and having coffee and hanging out, just looking just as normal as they are, it just blows your mind. You just can't see the problem. You can't see
I'd show up for a tamale.
Yeah. And there's some great ones around here. And like I said, but that's how mundane the problem really is, isn't it? I mean, it's just, we just don't see things for what they really are. It's what I call the cult world, a culture of cultures, a world of worlds. It's not just a bunch of people out there. It's a group of others. They're integral parts of our human society. They're next door, close and personal. So when you get to do that, when you do meet these folks, and when you went ahead to start conducting interventions, maybe you can give us a little more insight on how you actually do that. What is, when you speak of interventions for those bound by such groups, there's so many dramatic overtones. You hitch the word cult to it, and all kinds of wild speculation runs amok. So I understand that that's part of what you do as well. And maybe you can enlighten us as to what you believe an intervention should be. I mean, I've had my own share of interactions with people who thought there was something else, and turned out I didn't champion that. But what has been your specific organization's approach to that? And so, what do you do for something like that?
The most important piece, I would say what's foundational for this, and it remains at its core, is we're sharing information with people and we're asking a lot of questions. And I would actually flip-flop that if I was putting it in priority order. There's a lot of asking questions. Basically, we're asking people to reconsider what they've been taught. Like, do we have good evidence for this? What have you been taught? Is it matching scripture? What is actually going on here? And asking a lot of questions, hopefully getting the person to critically think again, because it's unlikely they've done that in a while. Usually that is the first skill that a group, an aberrant group, a cult, because sometimes, people use the C word or they don't. Sometimes it meets all the criteria, sometimes it doesn't, but cult-ish, they are just following what they're being told, and they're not supposed to question. They're not supposed to wonder. They're not supposed to have any doubts about anything. And the beauty about Christianity is we do get to question.
That's right.
We can have a doubt, and we can wonder, and we can want to investigate. And that's part of us loving God with our minds, right? Is to know him. And so we want to know him. We want to know him through his word and through his spirit and through the spirit. Sorry, I don't want to say that in a misleading way. So I don't want to imply modalism or anything,
I understand,
or partialism.
Right.
But yes, so it's really huge to have someone separate from their environment so they have a break from that indoctrination that's coming in, like try to cut off that just for a period of time, at least a few days. And let's take some space. Let's put our phones down. Let's not be taking in so much contact from the group that you're a part of. And let's take a look at the doctrine of what you've been told. Let's take a look at the practices of what you've been taught. Here's questions, here's information, here's other stories. And hopefully it's a time for the person to start to mentally separate enough just to look at it. We talk about this, we have this, cliche of hindsight is 20/20. Let's try to have a moment of hindsight where we can look back and see, what do I really think of that?
Right.
And it's near impossible to do well when we're in the environment actively. We may have these moments, those moments, hopefully those who are listening, you can track with me on this. You just have this feeling of like something's a little off, or, ooh, there's something about that, but it's so easy to shelf it.
Right.
It's so easy to just ignore that small voice, just slide on past it, ignore it, set it on the shelf, be like, maybe I'll look at it later. I probably won't. I don't know what to do with that. It doesn't fit in with everything else. I'm going to ignore it. The hope is during this break, some of those can get some attention.
Right.
And we can start to reconsider, maybe I wasn't wrong. Maybe I didn't have that hesitation because I'm bad. I'm not spiritual enough. I'm not holy enough. I'm not obedient enough. Maybe that's actually right. Maybe that's even God warning me. Mm-hmm. And I need to actually stop and pay attention and ask the questions.
And that's a great point. Let me just chime in and ask the question, another one in conjunction with that. How can people within a movement, and specifically maybe even the family members of those who are involved in it, how can they lead, or how can they or detect even how to recognize when that loved one who's under the experience, who's in it, has arrived at that point in which they can actually get into that discussion? See, you make a great point, but I guess timing is everything. You can't press ahead if a person's not ready to question, right? So how do you know? How do you know when it's time?
Yeah, they'll shut you down if it's not time. And you'll actually see they'll probably pull away more, and you may find that you don't have communication anymore, which of course is not what we want to see happen. We want the door to remain open. And the way, it's a little bit of a challenging question to answer, because I'm trying to think of it, because to me, I'm like, okay, in my mind, I could just tell. So how do I put that in words for someone else?
Mm-hmm, right.
There is it may be something they say, like they may say something like, oh, I was wondering about that, or, but oftentimes it's tone. So you can hear in someone's tone that maybe they're unhappy about something, they're displeased by something maybe irritated them, something rubbed them the wrong way. It's like, ooh, okay, I have a sense now that they're not fully in alignment. There might be a little opportunity here to ask them a question about it. Mm-hmm. Maybe offer a little piece of information. But you guys, it's way less about how much information you have. It's going to be a lot more about the questions you're asking to get them thinking for themselves. Because if someone had come to me, in fact, my husband, we were engaged, and he flat out said, I think you were in a cult growing up. And I just got mad. like that's not a good, that's not good. That's not going to be effective. It's not an effective intervention, to just tell someone you're in a cult. Like usually they're not going to listen to you. And sometimes I get pushback on that. Well, if you don't tell them they're in a cult, then they're not going to know. Well, they're not going to know even if I tell them they're in a cult because they're not going to listen to me. So it's more about showing and helping them come to that conclusion themselves of there's a problem here by asking good questions.
Right.
I love what Greg Koukl says about tactics in his book Tactics, for anyone too familiar. But the idea is putting a pebble or a stone in someone's shoe. If you have a pebble in your shoe, it's going to really irritate you after a while. You're going to have to stop, take your shoe off, and get it out. Right. Even if it's small, it's just a real nuisance. And so we want to create that. We want to put a pebble in someone's shoe so that stuff isn't quite as comfortable and quite as easy to swallow anymore. Right. And that's what I encourage people to do who are still interacting with their loved one. It takes time. And we also have to understand they're going to want to know that they're still loved by you because they've been love bombed. Yeah. And so if they're going to leave that, they want to know that they're going to be loved and accepted and cared for somewhere. And so that's really important too. So we don't always want to be focused on the pebble. We got to remember we love this person. Right. We want them to know that.
And the truth itself, just getting them to consider the question, that centered around that point of their experience in the practice and the doctrine and what they've encountered that has really, like you said, rubbed them wrong. That's when you create, like I said, the fissure, the crack. I think the technical psychological term is cognitive dissonance. It's when a person is finding difficulty with, reconciling the pure dogma that the cult's demanding they live by to their own experience. And they're failing to recognize, they're really seeing how it's not matching. It's not connecting, and that's again, going back to, that's a reference that I believe, Dr. Lifton's mind control speaks to when it talks about doctrine over person. It's when a person's expected to live in such a way, regardless what the belief costs them personally. And if you can find a loved one that's just struggling with that, trying to figure out, well, how am I expected to live on $20 a month when they have all my money? How am I expected to live, in such a way when they don't give me my medicine, when they don't give me enough time? You're looking for those points of discussion by which you listen. You're very actively listening. And then like you said, you encourage to keep going. So once you've gotten someone you think might be willing to have that discussion, what happens at that point? What do you guys do?
Well, again, typically, there's a mix. Like we're about a year and a half in. So we have had, several examples of actually being a part of this, in real time, in person. Excuse me. But oftentimes we're supporting people virtually. We're in contact with someone and we're walking alongside them that way. And we're kind of guiding their interactions with their loved one. Mm-hmm. And if they have a door open, it's so person specific. It's tough to give a blanket statement here, but right. I'd consider, is there an opportunity for the person to come home for a visit? Is that an open door? Maybe. If so, we always are hoping the person will take a break from their environment. Again, like I said before, if at all possible. So we absolutely want to consider, could that happen? Or is there an option to go visit the loved one and, stay at a hotel nearby and have them come and spend a night or two and have some space and have some actual in-person time if that hasn't happened in a while. So we always want that if we can. That's like the big goal, is for there to be some space, some separation. Mm-hmm. If that's not the case, then again, those continued conversations, trying to maintain contact. And again, don't come on too strong, because when we love someone and especially we're fearful for them, right? We're really concerned. And we feel like, there's a slight crack in the door. There's this fissure, as you called it, that maybe I can jump into. We can't start flooding them or they're going to shut back down. So It really takes a lot of self-discipline and self-restraint to not overwhelm.
Right.
And that's probably one of the biggest caution conversations I have with someone for lack of a better word, because this is not a game by any means, but for lack of a better word right now, this is a long game. Yes. And so we really got to settle in and buckle up and be ready for the long haul. This is going to probably take some time.
Right. Yeah. Part of pop culture today is that the notion of cult interventions, they're moments of dramatic rescue of a cult member, and it's all cleaned up in a 1-hour TV show. You know, and it can involve abduction, even violence to physically drag them out. Obviously, that's absolutely not what you or I would ever agree with at all. It's never, ever the same. It's always different. It is uniquely personal. It needs to be respectful and in the context of dialogue where it's wanted. If it's not wanted, then you don't go any further. You know, have you ever done any in-person interventions, or has everything been entirely been virtual?
No, everything has not been virtual. And so, yes, in person has happened. And something I wanted to say in connection with that question, as well as what you just said, is that, oh, sorry, I just lost my train of thought, so you'll have to edit this out. Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's live. We're good with it. But we were talking about deprogramming. That's the word that's people like to use.
Oh, yeah. Gosh. Yes. Oh, thank you so much for reminding me. So I want to remind people to model the boundaries that are healthy. So we don't want to have unhealthy boundaries and unhealthy behavior with someone who's already in something that's unhealthy. We want to actually model what is healthy. That's so important.
Yes.
And even in my interactions with people, I want to model good, healthy boundaries, good, healthy, communication patterns, spiritual maturity to the best of my ability for where I'm at in my walk, you know, and emotional maturity and how I'm going to respond to things. Like, even if I'm feeling really emotional, I don't want to react out of that. I don't want to respond out of that. Unless, and again, it's specific to the person. There are times and interactions with my own loved ones where I have allowed myself to show that I'm distraught on purpose, because I knew they needed to see it, because they needed to connect with the reality of the harm that was being caused. Right. So there can be times to do it, but with the knowledge of it's not fake, it's genuine, but I'm going to allow myself to show it on purpose. Other times I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to rein my emotions in. I'm going to share those in a different space than with this person, because I know it's not going to help. I know they're going to shut down. They're going to think it's dramatic, whatever it is. And so they're not going to hear me.
Right.
So it's really guiding someone along. What does this need to look like? But again, to bring me back, healthy boundaries and healthy relationships, healthy relational practices, is just really important to make sure we're showing that in our behavior with somebody else.
It's 110% agreed. I mean, that's been a bane in the side of the work we've done for the years. I remember back quite a few years back, I was asked to come dialogue with a young man who was being involved with a nomadic, aberrant group, and his family had incorporated, I won't mention their name, a very well-known cult interventionist that got involved and asked them to come and speak with him. And I knew this person, knew them well, and I knew that they had propensities, shall we say, towards involuntary abductions and stuff like that. And by the time I met them in the city where they were at, I got in there, I could immediately tell from the body language from everybody involved that there had been, that had indeed had taken place, and I was unaware of it. I walked right in the middle of that. And the interventionist just clapped me on the shoulder and says, "Listen, I got to fly out somewhere and do something else, but here's what happened, and you take over from here," basically. And it took off. And this young man staring at me, wild-eyed, the family's at all the doors, and I'm realizing that was, I won't get it long, but that was a tough one.
That's terrific.
It ended well. I did manage to finally calm him down and enter into dialogue with him, but the family really just took that wrong side. Like you said, they didn't model the very things they wanted him to be under. And so that's so important. We don't
Right.
we don't abduct people. We don't kidnap them
No.
against their will. We enter into dialogue in which people are free to leave. If they want to leave the room and stop talking, that's where it needs to be. And so that's what we've modeled in our own interventions. And we've been successful in helping people re-examine that. So
wonderful. Yes, we want our behavior to be congruent with our mission and our hope for the person that we're going to engage with. If that person is being controlled and manipulated, we don't want to control and manipulate in order to get them out either. We're actually matching the group in some way. And we're the family. And so it can be worse. I've heard people's stories who have had those deprogrammer experiences, say in the 70s. And now it's 50 years later and they're like, that was more traumatic than being in the group.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
The group didn't abduct me. The group chopped me into it. They unduly influenced me. They coerced me, but they didn't abduct me. Right. I still walked on my own. In this scenario, I didn't even walk on my own. And so it actually stands out as being worse. And again, I also want to empathize though with the parents who maybe have done this, who have made comments of, I just want to go abduct them. I just want to go take them. I understand the heart in that because you want to rescue your baby. Absolutely. You want your baby to be safe and you know that you're safe. But that doesn't show that you're safe. And so we've got to make sure that our actions are going to align. Good point.
Good point, Amber. You want them to be safe, but you have to show that you're safe. And that's that'll preach, as they say. That really does speak. So in our recovery work that we've done as well, part of the real challenges we've found is people have been led into those conversations and have decided to reassess and maybe break away. And that's a whole conversation right there we can have, but we don't have time for that, unfortunately. Part of that challenge in helping those who've been religiously abused recovery is assisting them in recognizing that what they endured was abuse and was part of a process of literal cultic mind control they were controlled by. So what kinds of controlling influences do you encounter victims struggling with? What are the things that they've encountered, after that are really, really weighing them down, that are things that need to be looked at if you're going to be helping someone leave a group and they leave? What are they going to be? What's the pitfalls? What are they struggling with?
Depending on the group, I have people that I work with who are struggling with logistics of where am I going to live? I don't have any credit. I don't have any savings. I don't have an ID. Right. I don't have a driver's license. I mean, so I want to point that out. That can be part of it. There could be unmet medical needs because medical care wasn't encouraged. Someone might need to get back on medication. So I would say first we need to look at those necessities, as in those very basic things. It's really tough to get to worldview and emotional state when someone doesn't know where they're going to live. So we always want to consider those aspects first. Right. And then I see people really wrestling with how to make sense of what happened to them. What was it? What do I take from it? What do I leave from it? Was there anything worth holding on to? Was there anything that was true? Was it all a lie? Who's at fault for that? There's a lot of self-blame that can happen, especially if someone was in a leadership role and they stepped out of, oh my goodness, I also now realize that I influenced others for something that was untrue, something that was harmful. And so there's a lot of talk about where does the blame actually go? Where does the accountability actually go? And what is your role? What was not? And kind of working that through. Receiving forgiveness can be really hard for people. I would say that can be a real pitfall for someone that holds them in this shame blame game from their previous experience. Is they're like, they can't even receive the forgiveness from Christ because they just feel so weighted by the guilt, and the impact they've had on loved ones, whether in leadership or not. And so that's something to pay attention to. Also, an aspect that I think is very highly overlooked in general, in things that I've read, and just other pieces I've heard from other support professionals is this aspect of grief. Yeah. And that is
Yes.
That is, yes. I mean, we have got to join people in their mourning and their grief, and we need to be present for them in that regard, because no one is coming out of anywhere on this spectrum of religious abuse. No one is coming out of that without grieving something.
Yeah.
Grieving losses of some kind. And when we're talking, we can talk about losses of just what we thought something was and we realized it wasn't. So unmet expectations of what we believe to be true. We're also experiencing more tangible losses of a community, actually, specific people, our home, our job. And then we can go really big and we can look at a loss of worldview. And that impacts absolutely literally everything that we do throughout the day. We're always looking through the lens of our worldview. And so to have that be just immediately ripped off your face leaves someone feeling like they're stumbling about and they don't even know how to function.
Right.
So we have really big losses that need to be addressed, but all within this context of this person is grieving. And they need the time to do so. And we need to support them in it.
So I appreciate you making that laundry list for us, Naomi, because that really is. Those are the specifics of recovery that need to be addressed, and that's for those transitioning out of a religiously abusive environment where their lives were on hold. They were completely frozen, shut down, and now you've freed them to rethink again. Now they're trying to reconcile their memories and all that time to where they are. Oh, it's incredible. Incredible. You cannot understate just how incredibly impacting that is. I was speaking with a man one time at a support group meeting back in Tennessee, and we were doing these, and he was telling me, listen, I had a son who had leukemia, and I lost him to leukemia, a son, and then he left a cult that he was in. He says the loss of his belief, his faith, of all that he knew that was real, was far more impacting, even to him, even against the backtrack of his son. He hurt more leaving the cult than the loss of his son. Because it's been so well said, if you there's a lot of things a man you can take away from a person, but take away their faith, and it could likely destroy them.
Yeah,
and there's so much. Yeah, it is. It's so families should be ready to understand that this is not a sprint. This person isn't going to get up and be teaching Sunday school the next day. Okay, this is a long distance run.
If they want to, ask them not to.
Yeah. It's not because you don't want people involved in something healthy. They need to understand that where they are at, what they're doing is safe for them, is right for them, and really meeting where they are at, And so with part of that is identifying those pitfalls within them. We find so many laboring under guilt and self-incrimination, fear and anguish. How do these abusive environments leave people so broken? That's one of the things that people never quite understand, is how cults do that, how they're able to do such a number on people. I mean, we've discussed it already, but maybe you can make it a little bit clearer for those who maybe have not quite got it yet. How do these cultic movements break people in such ways? How do they do that?
Well, if we're talking about a cult, it's all in house. So they're all of the time. I mean, if we're talking a cult, everything's being controlled. So the information they're getting is being controlled, their behavior is being controlled. I mean, if we look at the BITE model, or we look at the 8 points that you follow, it's impacting every aspect of life. So this is an all-encompassing situation, and they've been taught to conform so heavily, or there's going to be consequences. They could be excommunicated. I mean, it depends on the kind of group. There could be various kinds of abuse.
They can be destroyed.
Yeah, they can go to hell. Absolutely.
Demons can attack them. Yeah.
Right. And so it's completely fear-based. So someone's just so fearful of not totally falling in line and being obedient. And then all of a sudden they're told, no, all of that was a lie, and they're just supposed to not be scared and walk on happily forward. I mean, that's just completely unrealistic.
Yeah. Right. And the reason
that fear, it doesn't go. And talking from a personal experience, it took years And again, I would say the fear went away almost in layers, and in some areas faster than others. I remember celebrating Christmas for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
This was several years removed. I did not have a good time because I still had that fear, because there's a very real physiological component that happens in us. Like our neurocircuitry, the way our brain is going to communicate with the rest of our nervous system, there's a way that our body is going to communicate with itself.
Right.
And there are actual, real things that happen there. I don't want to get super technical, but this is kind of the science of trauma and what goes on when someone has experienced real life trauma. And the body is still going to respond the way it's learned to respond. And so it takes time to change that communication within our body. So I might not be thinking, oh my goodness, this is scary, but my brain is going to go into this threat reflex response of this is scary. And all of a sudden my body's released all these hormones and chemicals that stay in my body for 3 to 4 days. And that's kind of that fight, flight, freeze, fawn response we're going to have. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot that goes on. People talk about going numb. Well, your body will actually release an opioid that makes that happen.
Floating.
And so there's
snapping.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes on within our bodies as well. And that's not just going to stop even because I have a correct thought now. It takes time. And that's where a support professional or just really good family around you, people that you can trust. And they have to be people that you do feel like you can trust. And that in and of itself can be hard. Right. Because at the core, people coming out of these situations, they don't trust themselves to know who to trust. And that's really where it gets tough. And so that's usually where we start. But having that support around us is going to be really important. Right. And again, just understanding for those loved ones out there who are listening, just remaining patient. Like you said, this is not a sprint. This is going to take a long time. Yeah. But progress is made. So I don't want to leave that as some sort of death sentence. I don't want this to sound awful.
Not at all.
It takes a long time to get, again, from A to Z, or to get back from Z to A. Right. But we can get there. We do make progress. So it's not all of a sudden we jump really far. It takes time. And so over every week, progress is made. And so that's hopefully encouraging.
Right. And like you said, it is entirely immersive experience. People, I think people understand it in different ways, but it's one of the most profoundly impacting experiences a person will ever feel. I mean, it completely changes their lives. They've made complete changes in mind and heart and soul and spirit and relationships. Recovery from all that is possible, but it's got to be done carefully. It's got to be done intentionally. Good biblical counsel. I want to make this clear. Biblical counsel is incredibly important. It is vital to helping people recover if they really want that. One of the things that I've learned that in many instances that when people are recovering from religious cultism or any sort of cultism that could be involved spirituality, is that there are many secular therapists and secular interventionists that really kind of almost downplay the necessity for addressing that. They and they end up leading people to just really just kind of check that as just a bit of a superstition that they don't need. They need the ultimate reality that only facts and cold facts and logic and really arrive you to. But yet, recovery means something. The word means bringing back, is rescuing and getting back what you lost. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's where I think our ministries, which they are really trying to do what we can to help people in that area. Yes, having biblical counsel is so important. It is to help people understand that, but not all biblical counselors really get everything else we've spoken of. You can't just get people to sit down and re-sign their name on the Westminster Confession and say, "Yep, I'm good now." Yeah. It don't work that way. Well, it don't work that way.
No, and I just had someone tell me that they sat down with a biblical counselor after just coming out of a cult, and all they got talked to about for the first 3 sessions until they said, "I'm not going back because this isn't what I need," was about how they need to forgive. Mm-hmm. I'm like, they don't even know what they're forgiving yet. Like they don't even understand what all that was to even know who to forgive yet. So like we're really not starting in the correct place here. Like we can get to forgiveness, but they've got to even know, well, who am I forgiving for what? Because I'm still not sure, what was up and what was going on.
Right.
And something that I ask people permission to do, and usually they're very, amenable to it, whether they subscribe to Christianity, whether they believe in Christianity or not, is I'll ask them, even whether you believe the Bible to be the Word of God or you do not believe it to be the Word of God. I do, we're very upfront about that, but it can be really helpful to show you that what you were taught isn't actually even in here. Right. Because then you can decide about the Bible based on what's actually in it. And also, you can properly place the accountability and the blame where it goes, because sometimes people are blaming the Bible. Well, my leader was just preaching what's in the Bible. The Bible's the problem. And then they maintain some kind of endearment towards their abusive leader. And it's, no, what they taught wasn't even in the Bible. The Bible is not the problem. And then they can properly place that accountability on the leader. And then hopefully, again, cut that tie of endearment and that tie of, oh, well, the leader was just doing what this said. Like, it wasn't the leader's fault. It's the Bible's fault. And we need to correct that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that's where, like you said, you have to go slow and understand what those specific things that they struggle with. I don't know if you've ever have read the book, but it's an old book. It's one I would recommend anyone struggling with this very thing to think about. There's a great book written by, I forgot her name. Oh goodness. She was a former Mormon, and I don't remember what, oh gosh. Now I'm going blank. Anyway, her name was Janice Hutchinson. And she wrote an excellent book. Out of the cults into the church. And this wasn't the classic treatment of just, read the Bible, pray, and all will be well with you. She really got into really understanding and helping former members take apart their cult experience and understand what had been done to them. And that's basically what we are trying to do in interventions and in post-cult recovery, is help people understand what's going on in there, what has happened to them, what did they experience, and then help them understand it. It was a process that was done to everyone, and it just impacted them, and that there's ways beyond that. And I think that's really a very important point to press home, and you're absolutely right on that one too. So finally, as we're wrapping this up, and I really appreciate you spending the time. I wish we could spend a lot more time, but we don't. But I know you've got things to do with your life as well. So how would you, when you do start talking to your clients about recovering a balanced Christian faith and helping them reintegrate into new life, how do you handle that? How do you address that with people? Like I said, we've been mentioning the post-cult experience debriefing and helping understand that, and then referrals to professionals as needed. We certainly don't. I certainly am an advocate of professional therapy, and I regularly refer people on to find therapists as needed, because that's not where I'm at, but I can certainly help in other ways. But in those other ways are, in terms of helping people recover what is lost. To me, that's, a foundational aspect of recovery. How do you guys address that? I understand part of your programming is doing that with the mentoring and everything like that, so maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, the mentoring, which is one-on-one, or, a couple of people, if it's two friends, relatives, spouses. And then we have a group that I piloted it this past spring. I had an incredible experience with it, and it's focused on recovery. So it is for people who have experienced religious abuse, and they are trying to get a stronger foundation. And it's part one of a 2-part series. We're working on what we're calling a Can I series coming up that we're going to release in October. People can sign up for that. And this other one we're releasing again in September. But it's what I would consider to be sort of the foundation. We're looking at two aspects. We're looking at the big questions that come up about Christianity, about God, about faith. And so we're exploring those questions, I would say, kind of on that biblical theological studies / apologetics realm. Bringing those two together is always important. And then we're also looking at these kind of day-to-day skills or tools, I would call them, like what is a boundary? Because unlikely that they've been taught what that looks like. And we want to make sure that they feel like they can say no when they need to in the future. And so what are boundaries? How do I trust again? How do I trust others? In order to do that, I need to trust my assessment of others. In order to do that, I might really need to be able to trust God and what I believe he's speaking to me. So that all connects together. Finding a healthy community. What is a healthy community? What do we even mean by that? What are some criteria we look for? What's some due diligence steps I can take before I choose this community or that community? And so we look at, again, these kind of practical day-to-day tools for healthy functioning, as well as these big worldview questions that we can then, couch that within. And that is also, I would say, that does dictate a lot of the conversations. Or let me put it this way. These two series have come out of the hundreds of conversations that I've had with people. Mm-hmm. And these are the topics that just come up over and over and over again. And so let's create a series where people could come together as a group which in and of itself could be a healing experience. Yeah. To have a group come together and have it be respectful, understanding, empathetic, that people listen well. I mean, that in and of itself is like, wow, that was safe. That was actually an example of a healthy communal experience. So yeah, maybe it does exist out there. Maybe this is indeed possible. So it's really incredible to offer that for people.
Great. Well, we'll look forward to. I look forward. I've been so busy, I haven't a chance to really dig into that there on your website. But I know that you've been offering these services for some time, and I really would certainly commend anyone to stop by your website and check out what you're doing and get a little more insight into all that. And what is your website again, by the way? It's BeEmboldened.org?
Sure. Yeah, BeEmboldened.com. So BeEmboldened. Yeah, BeEmboldened.com. And some of this isn't on the website yet because the specifics for the groups that are coming up. I actually met with our website team just earlier this week, and they have about 4 months of work probably ahead of them because fortunately we're growing, the word's getting out that we're here. So as we are able to serve more, we're needing to grow and build and put more services out there. So please continue to check in on it, maybe weekly or once a month and see what's being added. And as always, anything I'm referencing here, if you don't see full details on the website yet, they're coming. But if you want them, just send us an email, hello@beemboldened.com, and I'd be happy to get you the information you're looking for.
Right. It's a great site. If anyone's not been to visit, it's just incredible. So much more user-friendly than you can possibly believe. There's some really good stuff there. And our own clunky website is long in need of some very serious updates. But our website's there. It's certainly a little bit older, and we're more clean. We certainly tend towards archiving a lot of research and a lot of links and things. So, but we've always had a recovery concern, and we're trying to be a little bit more proactive in that. And like I said, we've been involved in helping people, but I just like I said, I dip my colors to you guys. You guys are doing exactly where I'd like to be right now in terms of helping people understand that.
And it's wonderful to not be the only one. And so I'm so thankful to be connected to you and to have this opportunity to collaborate with you, because I can't do it all. Be Emboldened can't do it all. And so part of what we care about is also, again, being that hub for resources of, hey, these are other organizations that exist. These are other good people doing good work, and you can seek them out as well.
Absolutely.
And so I'm so grateful for this opportunity to connect with you and hear more about what you're doing. And again, hopefully serve those who are listening and leave them with a message of where people are at right now. If they're in a place of suffering and struggle, it can be temporary, just like it's been for me. Yeah. And that's what makes my story beautiful, is what God's done with it. It's the redemption that makes it beautiful. Otherwise, it's just a really, really sad story. Right. But it didn't end there, and it doesn't have to end there for anyone. And so I just feel incredibly honored and privileged to walk alongside people and encourage them to keep going. it takes time, but keep taking those small steps because there's so much goodness out there for you.
Yeah, right. So, and that's the whole ball. That's what we say, at our, and we always say, there's an old tired saw that still does say something today. Where there is life, there is hope. I've always believed that. I've told every person who's been in the darkest place of their life when I've tried to share and offer counsel as well as interventional services, says, listen, where there's your loved one's still alive, there's hope. There's things going on that are keeping you apart. There is hope. Just keep pressing on. You can begin to rebuild from whatever part you're in, no matter how hopeless it seems. And I think organizations such as yours and mine, in some small way, we certainly do believe that there is a way of redemption through all that. And we know Christ is at the center of it all. His gospel and understanding it is part of that. But living it out now then becomes the critical thing. I mean, it's one thing to have all your theological ducks in a row. It's another quite to see where people actually are again living as if it matters and it affects their life. And that's who the kind of community people need to see. And so as a final thought, I'll close now, and we'll close our podcast. And once again, thank you for coming on, Naomi. I'll leave you with a final opportunity to speak to listeners about about these issues and anything else you'd like to say. And as a minister, I strive to encourage people to not give up on seeking and understand God's love. And his care. So is there anything else you'd like to say about that, or anything else in your mind? I'd like to give you the last few minutes on the floor here, ma'am.
Well, there was something that you had just said about, while there's still life, there's hope. And I 100% agree with that. And when we're talking about people who are involved in a cult, yes, there's still hope for them to come out. There's still hope for this to be different. And as Christians, we get to even go a step further than that. And we get to know that there's hope even in death for us. And that is just an incredible message that I find so encouraging. And whatever this looks like in your life, I hope that if someone is really down on the idea of Christ and is like, no, I don't believe in that. I don't, this was used to harm me. The Bible was used to harm me. I would want to encourage you just with so much compassion and empathy from someone who herself could not look at the Bible for years, that the Bible may actually be, and God may actually be exactly who you're looking for and exactly who can help you along in this journey. And let's not let what someone else did to us steal that opportunity. Let's not give them that win.
Right.
Let's explore it for ourselves slowly, carefully, with kindness, grace, and patience for ourselves, because it can be really triggering and really hard to do. Again, find someone to come alongside you to help you with that process. And let's reconsider if it's something that we've closed the door on. Because again, that ex-leader may have, or that, ex-leader in your life may have actually stolen more from you than you've realized, if that's the case. And ultimately, I want you to have the ability to choose again. And you get to choose what you choose. And I respect that. And I genuinely mean that.
Absolutely.
I don't want you to let them have chosen. I don't want them to have chosen for you by throwing it all out. And so I think that would be my final message is, if you've closed the door on it, please consider reconsidering, and just know that there's so much hope, for a change in your life moving forward.
Yes, there is. Jesus was handed the book of the prophet Isaiah, and we read this in Luke chapter 4, and he says, when he opened the book, he found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he's anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." When you read what Jesus wrote, excuse me, when you read what he read, when you read what is written about what he said, you recognize really quickly where God's perspective is in all this. You recognize really quickly that God isn't all about ordering your life with theological busywork and oppression. He's about sending people out with the good news that heals, that frees, that brings sight and hearing back to those who are blind and deaf, and to set at freedom those who are oppressed. Now that may not be the God that a lot of people hear about in groups like the movements that we've talked about. A lot of people leave groups thinking God is a monster, and understandably so. But as you said so well, Naomi, so well, you don't want to, you don't want to miss the opportunity to hear what God's real heart really is like. And I appreciate you bringing that up. It's so vital to recovery, I think. I mean, you can recover without re-embracing faith. You certainly can do that. But there's so much that you put yourself out to gain through faith. And just because the faith was poisoned and wrong doesn't mean that faith itself is something to reject. And I appreciate you helping me, like I said, maybe encourage people to keep that point in mind as they reconsider their involvement in the dangerous movements like cults and abusive churches.
Thanks for listening today as we explored just where are we going. Our prayer is that you have been encouraged and strengthened, and if necessary, challenged in your daily journey through life. Jesus is coming. You can fall with the night, or you can rise with the sun. The choice is yours. You can email us with questions and comments at feedback@spiritwatch.org. And if you need urgent personal spiritual help, email us at help@spiritwatch.org. We look forward to hearing from you. Please follow our podcasting at our Facebook page and our website at spiritwatch.org. This podcast is a production of Spirit Watch Ministries, taking heed that no man deceives you.